Good evening, everyone. Sorry we're a little bit late, but we're here, so that's the main thing. And welcome to our Haunted Scotland with our special guest, Mr. Rick McCullum, who's came back in to join us again. So thanks very much for coming back in, Rick. It's always great to have you on.
Well, you're welcome.
Rick is his list is like that. Really, he's a stuntman, actor, producer, author, investigator. You've done just quite a bit of everything, really, haven't you?
All of those things except producer. I've never produced a movie. I've written one. I've written books. So author is good, actor is good, stuntman's good, stunt coordinator's good. I've done all those things, but producing, no. Because everybody, when you say producer, everybody thinks I'm the guy that was the producer of Star Wars. Because he and I have the same name.
All right. Tony's saying sup, guys.
Yo, Tony.
So tonight we're going to be discussing haunted locations in Scotland. We're going to give you a wee bit of the history to them. We've got 4 places to talk about. Sorry, Gail. Gail's one of our team. We've kept her waiting. I've been waiting since 9 p.m. So we're going to start off with a place that Rick is very familiar with. It's a place we wanted to go to, but we don't actually know why we've never went. We've passed there many times, but we've never went, and that is Roslyn Chapel. So that's where I nearly forgot Laura. Sorry, Laura has written 2 pieces for 2 of the locations. She's got an ear infection, otherwise she would have been with us tonight. So we're going to be reading off what Laura's wrote. And Sarah's going to start us off with Rosalind Chapel.
Yes. So, where to start?
At the beginning.
Shut your face.
Yeah, Scott, shut your face. She's trying to read.
All right, sorry, Rick. Yeah, I know.
So, Roslyn Chapel is situated 7 miles south of Edinburgh, and it's close to the Scottish borders. And it's in a village called Roslyn, which is in Mid-Lothian. It was founded in 1446 by William St. Clair, who was the 3rd and final St. Clair Prince of Orkney. And he had amazing plans, and he had intended to create the Chapel of St. Matthew's, and this was to be the centrepiece of an educational establishment. Well, see, I didn't write this because there's too many big words.
This is one of Laura's pieces.
By the way, that's Roslyn Chapel right behind me.
It's a beautiful building. So I don't know why we've never actually went and paid that a visit, but we will be going definitely this year.
So he founded the town of Roslyn to house his workers, and he hired master masons, and he oversaw the creation of the beautiful, iconic building which we know today as Roslyn Chapel, which is behind Rick. The chapel itself took 40 years to build, and within the chapel, almost every surface boasts carved stonework. Many of the carvings tell biblical stories, share moral messages, or celebrate nature. Some angels play instruments. Devils, dragons, knights, animals, and ladies, and of course Jesus and other religious imagery make their appearance in the stone. In the year 1484, Sir William died and was interred at Roslyn. Subsequently, the plans he had for Roslyn were buried with him, leaving the chapel in the form that you see today. And in 1571, the endowments for Roslyn were seized as the effects of the Reformation began, and in 1630 Sir William St Clair of Roslyn is granted the charters from the Masons of Scotland. This confirmed the St Clairs as traditional Grand Masters of the Masons in Scotland. It's to do with all the Freemasons and stuff in it.
I'm sorry.
By the year 1560, Oliver Cromwell's troops sacked Roslyn Chapel. They did spare the chapel, but only because it was used for stabling the troops' horses. In the same year, William St Clair died at the Battle of Dunbar. He is believed to be the last knight buried with full armour in the vault below the chapel. By the year 1780, Roslyn inspired poets such as Alexander Nasmyth and Robert Burns to visit. Perhaps they were inspired by the wild landscapes and overgrown ruin of the chapel. In the year 1842, Queen Victoria visited Roslyn, and upon seeing its green and overgrown state, she expressed that it should be preserved. In 1862, it brings restoration works, and Sunday services began again for the first time in over 200 years. By the 1950s, it became apparent that conservation work was needed. The roof was repaired, the interior carvings in the chapel were cleaned and applied with a protective coating, and the stained glass windows in the baptistry were also added. Oh, there's a lot of information on this place. In the year 2003, the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown is published. The main characters in the book find themselves at Roslyn Chapel, and as a result, Roslyn Chapel comes to the worldwide attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's never a film or a book I've read. Roslyn Chapel has many links, including the Knights Templar, the Lost Ark of the Covenant, and, amazingly, the Holy Grail. According to legend, the treasure of the fabled Knights Templar is stowed in a deep vault whose entrance is sealed off by a stone wall. It is also claimed that Roslyn Chapel is home to the Ark of the Covenant, the real stone of Destiny, the heart of Robert the Bruce, and even the head of Jesus Christ. Some individuals believing that the stonework in the chapel can be decoded to give a secret message. Roslyn certainly has a fascinating and intriguing history surrounding it, but does it have any spirits? Yes, it does. It is reported that in the year 2006, a group of actors were rehearsing in the chapel for a play. One actor claims he saw a fairy-like creature in the grounds of the building, while another actor claims he was looking up at the chapel after rehearsals, and as he did, he heard a child's voice in the crypt. The ghost of a white lady is also a common sight. Legend says that she is from the St Clair family, who was bewitched by an evil spell and sleeps in an enchanted chamber, thus waiting to be rescued by a knight. And once rescued, the spell will be broken and the knight will be granted great treasure. An apparition of a dog roaming the grounds around the chapel is a common sight, and it is said that on a stormy night, its ghostly barking can be heard. A monk is often seen praying at the altar in the crypt, as well as being surrounded by 4 knights. Other hooded monks have been seen wandering the chapel and grounds. As well as these sightings, many have claimed to hear strange noises as you approach the crypt, and you feel a very strange chilled wind even on a summer's day.
Really good. That was Laura wrote, so thank you to Laura who's in the chat. So Rosalind Chapel dates a way back, and I'll be totally honest, I'd heard about it, but the first time I seen it was when it was featured in the Da Vinci Code, as was mentioned in there. That was the first time I'd actually seen the building. But Rick, you've been there, you've experienced it. What's your feels about Roslyn Chapel? And
I've actually been there quite a few times. A lot of people don't realize how big the whole setup of Rosalind Castle is. Rosalind Chapel. There's also Rosalind Castle, which is about maybe 400 yards away. There's 3 graveyards of different periods that are right down the hill, and then there's a big park, and then there's like the where they built the ammunition for things. There's a creek that has a little hut in it that nobody knows, but I've seen. I saw it. I have a picture of it, but it's overgrown. It's in the side of in the side of the river. It's a very small hut. I have no idea what it was for, but the place is huge. I mean, it's fascinating. When you go inside, there's actually this is actually one of the cemeteries from Rosalind. As you go down the stairs, you can see the stairs in the background. To the right, there's another cemetery. There's another cemetery up closer to me. That's the one all the way on the bottom. There's one there's one that, the other way. There's one that way, and there's another one that's farther down. If you go down here and turn left, you'll walk all the way down to the castle. So, I mean, it's not just a little chapel and you go there. I mean, it's actually very big. I always go to a place called the Chapel Cross Guest House, which is right across the street from where you walk in. And anybody has seen lights in the middle of the night out there, it was probably me, right? So I've been out there by myself quite a few times. Been out there with ghost hunters from England and also from Scotland. And it's a very interesting place. One of the scariest things ever happened to me was I came out of the chapel, and there's actually like a restaurant and a gift shop that's attached to it that you have to go through to pay to get in, and you come out that way. And I was coming out and I was looking at the other buildings that were there, and there were 2 older ladies. And as I walked by, I said, "Afternoon, ladies." And I walked on, and I'm walking along and I'm looking at the building, and in front of me, about 15, 20 feet, it sounded like a guard dog on steroids went. So I'm looking off to the side and I just froze, because I figured if it's a guard dog, you don't want to make any movements. So I just turned my head real slowly and I look, and there's nothing there. When you go there, there's about 200 yards to walk in, and it's got hedges on both sides, so you can see everything right back down into Rosalind. Nothing there, right? So I walked up and I looked down right where we're looking. Nothing there. I looked into the 2 parking lots. Nothing. No dogs, right? So while I'm standing there, the 2 ladies walk by and they look at me and they go, "We heard it too." So that was kind of scary, because you hear anything that's that loud, you instantly think it's demonic, because that's the only thing that comes across like that. I got to see if I can find this picture. As I was walking back, I had been staying over in a place called Dalkeith. A lady had been very, very nice enough to let me stay in her house while she was gone. So while I was there, I would walk back from Rosalind. It was 8 miles. I would walk back through the forest. And as I got over to the crosswalk where I was going to go over towards the house, I was still really kind of worried about that whole thing, the growl. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of looked up and looked up and I said, "You know what? I might need some help on this one." Right. And I looked down and I can't find the picture. I could find it, but it would take forever. You got other things to see. But I looked down and my shadow on the ground had a big cross right over my left shoulder. So I was like, "Well, okay, that's a pretty good sign." So that was really cool.
You can't ask for a bigger sign than that, really, can you?
No, I mean, it was stunning to see that.
I mean, what's the? I've only seen photographs of it. I saw in that film, as I said. What's the kind of atmosphere like? I imagine that when you go to it, it's like going back in time.
Oh, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing when you go there. The feeling, I mean, the vibes you get from there, you go back in time, especially when you're down by the castle and through the graveyards. And the chapel itself has such amazing background. So I don't know if you can see this picture or not. I'll try and put it up. Yeah, there it is. You see it with the cross over my shoulder?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the other picture is right exactly where the growl was.
And there is reports of a dog being seen.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I've been in that chapel many times. This will give you an idea how many times I go there.
That your souvenir.
We see what it says.
Rosalind Chapel price £8.
No, it says Roslyn Chapel member price $0.
So I can't even read that. I've got my glasses on as well. I can't read that. That's bad, isn't it?
So yeah, I've been there quite a few times. Fantastic place. When we go on the tour, because you guys know that I'm having a tour there in July, we're going to go to Roslyn Chapel, and I'm going to try and make sure they just don't go in the chapel and rush out and try to go somewhere else, because you really do have to take that walk down to the castle and back, because the castle itself, there's hardly any of it left. I mean, they have like a couple floors below ground that you can actually rent and stay in, and then they've got some of the castle above. And they have these 5 cutouts that look like they were used for cooking outside in a wall. And if you go all the way to the far one, it's cut out so that you can actually make, sneak through there and go down and back into the woods behind it. So that's kind of cool. Not too many people usually see that.
So I think, after researching the chapel, I thought the chapel being extremely peaceful.
It is. There are stories there that there was a master stoneworker who carved one of the pillars, and he left. He went off to find more ideas, and he left for 7 years. So the people that were building it asked the apprentice to do the other pillar, because they have 2 big pillars up there. They're very ornate. So he did it, and when the master guy came back again, he saw it, and he hit him in the head with his hammer and killed the apprentice. Well, that guy ended up being executed also. So there's a little strange energy in that place. I mean, there was a murder there. So I don't know if that happened in the chapel or not, though.
I think it's one of these places. I mean, it happens a lot. People go to places, like chapels, historic buildings, and they walk in and they walk around, and it's like a 5-minute walk. They'll look up, that's nice, that's lovely, and away they go. I think Roslyn's the kind of place you need to take your time.
Oh, you have to
really look at the structure of the building, all the stone carvings, the whole lot, and really take it in and appreciate the amount of work and history that's actually in the place. Well,
there's other mysteries inside there. This place was built in 1447 is when it was born, or when it was made. 1446 too, they say. But anyway, there are stone carvings in there, which are obviously ears of corn. Okay. Well, the only place that was growing ears of corn at that time in history was the United States. This was up there in 1446. Who did it? Columbus came in 1492. That's 50 years later. Who had already been there and came over there and carved the corn? So that's what I'm saying. If you look at what's in there and just look around, it's fascinating. It's one of the most fascinating places I've ever been. And I know that the Da Vinci Code put it back on the map. So now it's really a big tourist attraction because of that. But it's definitely worth seeing. I mean, anybody that goes to Scotland and doesn't see Roslyn Chapel and all the stuff around it is missing out.
I feel quite bad now. Obviously, we've lived in Scotland all our days, and we've never been. We definitely need to go.
Well, what else is so nice about the whole area is Roslyn itself is only like 2 or 3 blocks long, the city. And then there's the Chapel Cross guest house on one side where I always stay. And on the other side is the original Roslyn Inn, which is also a restaurant. They've got a little courtyard out there. So I always try and stay several days there because now I've made friends with the people that own both places and the restaurant and the little stores they have there. So, I mean, it is so peaceful. And the fact is that my room, usually I can look straight out my room and straight into Roslyn, you know, where the chapel is and everything else. And I mean, anybody that goes to Scotland should take a day at the Chapel Cross because it's an old time inn and you really get the whole feel of the town, the chapel, the whole deal, you know?
So that's definitely a place to go. What about underneath the chapel? I know there's all these stories and conspiracy theories and, you know, would you think it's actually underneath the chapel? Obviously, there's crypts, etc.
Well,
do you think there's secret tunnels and whatnot?
There are tunnels under there. They actually go out to the river, but they've been blocked off for forever. Can't remember what year it was, but whoever was in charge of the chapel had them dig up the floor in one area, and they went down to see what was down there, and they never found anything conclusive. I asked the guy that was in charge at the castle one time, I said, look, I know you say that, you know, there might be the Holy Grail here in the Ark of the Covenant and, you know, all that stuff. And I said, and the Knights Templar brought it here. They said, yeah, that's what they say. I said, this place was built in 1446. The Knights Templar were wiped out in 1307.
So over 130.
And so it's 140 years difference. Where was it hiding all the time? If you know, but of course, as everybody knows, the Knights Templar really didn't get wiped out. They actually had a place not very far from there. They had a lodge or, you know, whatever they call their kind of place, not very far from Roslyn. So the Knights Templar have a pretty big presence in there. Matter of fact, the Sinclairs were one of the biggest benefactors and members of the Knights Templar. I don't know if many people know that, but that is the case. And the other thing, I'll tell you another thing that's kind of interesting. You won't be able to see it on any tours or anything, but I was lucky enough to get to go there. Across from Rosalind Chapel out there, there's a river that goes through it, a wide creek, and there's cliffs and everything else. But in those cliffs is a spot that you can't see from over there. You have to go on the other side of the river and go down this side of this cliff to get into it. It's actually the cave where William Wallace used to hide when the British were looking for him.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you actually spend some time there, there's one of the most fascinating things. I kind of bumped into it. I decided to go out for a walk the other way instead of going this way for a while. And I walked down about a mile or so. And there is a stone there, a big monument about the Battle of Roslyn in 1303. Now, it's not in most of the history books. And people say that it's probably because Coleman was the leader of this fight. They say William Wallace came into it too, but, you know, you never know with the history because the way it was back then, it's just kind of all handed down. But 30,000 British came to go after the guy from one of the Sinclairs. And he went after him because the king's friend wanted to marry the girl that he was going to marry so they could solidify a union between two countries. So he sent 30,000 soldiers to come in just to kill that guy, one of the Sinclairs. Well, yeah. And what happened is that the townspeople heard about it, and 8,000 of them showed up for the battle. Right now, it's 30,000 against 8,000. But what happened is the generals for the British were a little cocky, and they split up their ranks into three, into different, you know, way apart from each other. And the Scottish people, who are, you know, pretty good warriors themselves, just looked up and said, well, there's only a third of them right there. Let's go get them. Right. And by the time they got done doing them in, they went and turned on the next guys. And according, they say it is in the history of the fight between the British and the Scots, by far the most bloody and deadly battle in history. And there's almost no reporting of it. And they say they think it's because John Coleman was the big hero of the battles, and Robert the Bruce hated him. And the fact is that Robert the Bruce murdered him. If you recall that, they had a fight in one of the castles, and Robert the Bruce killed him. So, yeah, it's a very interesting story about the whole thing about Roslyn Chapel and, you know, the connection to the Knights Templar. And
that's the thing I love about history. You know, it's the amount of see, Laura does the biggest bulk of her research for us, but when you sit and you read back in these things like Rosalind Chapel, and you realise, well, you've not realised before just how much history is in this place, and then you start to dig, and the more you dig, the more you get, and that's what really fascinates me about the whole kind of history. So just before we move on to the next one, what about the paranormal side of it, Rick?
Well, you know, it's the same thing they say, the lady in white and the monk and things like that. I still want to know what that growl was. You know, because that doesn't happen. I mean, to hear a big growl like that, you know, I have heard now from several local residents that there's a very large black cat that roams around out in the woods, like a panther. So who knows?
There's quite a few stories all over Scotland about black cats.
Yeah, well, and also in England.
You hear them.
So there may be some truth to it.
I've heard quite a few stories, especially up north here in Gordon's area, kind of thing, about black cats roaming about and people have seen them. So it does make you think twice. You know, all these individual reports for all different parts of the UK, Scotland, England, that they can't be made up. There must be something behind it.
You know? Well, you know what's funny is that just up until recently, there was a cat that lived in Roslyn Chapel. His name was William, a little black cat. And one day I was there with the guys from England, and we were walking down the way to go to the castle. And here comes William, and he's walking along all the stonework right next to us. So he walked all the way down, and then he jumped down, and I stepped on him in the dark, right? And he howled, and I looked out. I said, "William, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. You're black, and it's night, you know." And he looked at me for a minute. He's like, "Oh, okay, we're good, right? As long as you didn't step on me on purpose."
I've done. We've got two cats, and one's kind of blacky brown, and I've stood in the blacky brown one a few times when it's been dark. Usually they just kind of blend in. But we're moving further north. Again, this is one that was written by Laura in the chat. It's Dornan Castle.
Which one?
Dornan.
Oh, yeah, I've never been there.
So
it's a beautiful looking castle. I've seen it on multiple times. You know, that'd be a place I'd definitely like to go. I do think it's one of the most photographed places in Scotland.
It's the most famous castle in Scotland. That's a castle that's featured on a lot of the shortbread tins and stuff.
It's got like a little walkway or driveway that goes like out to it, and it's like on it's out on like a big rock, right, with a lake around it, or as you say over here, a loch.
A loch. It's situated on an island in the Western Highlands of Scotland, close to the village of Dornan, at the point where there's 3 sea locks meet: Loch Duke, Loch Long, and Loch Ish. I hope I pronounced that last one right. If I haven't, then I do apologise. Because in Gaelic, Ellendolan means the island of Dornan. The name refers to the legend of a 6th century Irish saint Dornan, who lived on the island for a time before being martyred on the island of Egg. There's been no evidence found of Christian occupation, but that doesn't mean to say that it has not been there. It could have been buried beneath the castle walls. Ellendolan was inhabited around the 6th century, but the first fortified castle was built in the mid-13th century and stood guard over the lands of Kintail. and possibly built by Alexander II or the Third to help strengthen the defences against the Danes, or by Farquhar II, who was the Earl of Ross. But we do know that in the late 13th century, Dornan was held by Kenneth Mackenzie, and by 1331, Randolph, the Earl of Moray and Warden of Scotland, as Dornan Castle prepared for his reception. Misidoris, I'll try to read this, Laura. Sorry, though. Misidoris are arrested, and 50 of them were executed, their heads displayed on the castle walls. So I think these are the ones that invaded the castle. And by the year 1719, Ellendorn was occupied by Spanish soldiers who were part of a force of 300 who landed on the west coast to support the Jacobite uprising. Government frigates responded by bombarding the castle and subsequently reduced it to ruins. But between the years 1719 and 1911, the castle lay in ruins and abandoned. Between the years 1911 and 1913, the castle was bought by John McCrae Gilstrap, the second son of the McCrae family. By 1912, the project to restore the castle had begun, and after 20 years of hard work, toil and labour, the castle is finished. 1955 brings the opening of the castle to the public by John McCrae, grandson of John McCrae Gilstrap. And in 1983, the Conquerors Trust is formed by the McCrae family to care for the castle. There are 4 generations of the McCrae family, past, present, and future, who are still the constables of the castle today. But as we know, the castle was restored in the 20th century, and it is here that we discovered the castle had not lain completely empty while it was in a ruined state. 2 spirits are seen regularly, one being the spirit of a fallen Spanish soldier who is said to linger in what is now the gift shop with his head under his arm, and the other is a ghostly lady known as Lady Mary, who has been haunting one of the bedrooms. So it's not a castle that we know a lot about, but it is a famous cat. It sounds bad. We should know about it. It is a castle that's quite famous in Scotland, and probably the most beautiful.
No, it's very famous. Like I say, I see pictures of it all the time. I'd like to go. I've never been there. But I can tell you something about a castle I just found out about, if you want to hear. I found out that we actually have a MCCALLUM castle in it's called Duntroon Castle. And it's very famous for being haunted. There was a guy that was known as Colquito. He was also called Alistair the Devastator. He's like 7 feet tall and shaggy hair, and he was an amazing warrior. Well, the MCCALLUM clan is part of the Campbell clan. Mm-hmm. And when they went to attack this castle, the McCallums were there to fight with the Campbells and everything else. Well, they had fended all these people off, and they had captured the bagpiper that went with Colquito. Anyway, they were sitting there, and here comes the ship sneaking in late at night. And the guards saw them, and the piper went up, and he goes, well, he says, you should really allow me to play this song because they won't come in unless I play it. That's the key that everything's okay. So the head of the clan said, okay, you can do that. Well, as soon as he started piping, the ship turned around and left. So they knew that the guy had warned them. So they took the piper inside and they cut his hands off, which killed him, obviously. And they took him out to the courtyard and they buried him. Well, everybody figured that it was one of those, ghost tales with no history behind it. But the ghost part of it is they still hear the bagpiper up on the top where he had been playing before. But everybody figured there was no history to it until, I think it was in the 1800s. They were digging up the courtyard to do some renovation, and they found a skeleton with no hands. So that's actually at our family castle. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah, the Campbells gave the Malcolms. The Malcolms are also my family. Malcolm and McCallums are both the same family. They gave the castle, granted the castle to them, so that they've been there ever since. Never been there myself.
But that kind of, finding the skeleton with no hands kind of backs up the story.
Yeah, when you find a guy without hands, and you've heard the story from before, and it's where they say they buried him, you got to kind of go with it.
It's a bit hard to dismiss. I mean, there's a lot of stories, not just in Scotland, but England with castles as well. But mystery ghosts. We've seen this, we've seen that, and a lot of it's just stories, rumours, that have been handed down generation to generation, etc. There is quite a few in Scotland, but to find actual a handless skeleton, that just more or less, backs it up. I mean, Ellen Dornan. I keep calling it Ellen Dornan. Ellen Dornan. I found interesting she's reported the ghost of the Spanish soldier who carries his head about. You think, well, a Spanish soldier, if he was killed there, why would he still be there? Why would he not kind of return to his homeland, sort of thing?
Maybe he can't see because he's not got a heat.
You can pretty say that about every spirit, though. Why are they still there?
Why would he still haunting there or wander there, whatever word you would?
Because he can't see because he's not got a heat.
Right, okay.
So he can't see where he's
That's
going.
Sarah's input on it. He can't see because he's not got a heat. He's not got a head, But you're doing well, right? You're understanding me so far. I'm half an hour in.
I'm getting better, I'll tell you.
I think I think the more we see each other or talk to each other, the more you learn Scottish.
Well, I got to tell you, after I hang up, my ears are bleeding from trying to hear so hard.
Just wait till July till you come over here. Oof.
Well, I told you my other friend with Scottish Paranormal, he's got a real heavy brogue too. So, I'm always yelling at him when we're in the car. So, will you just speak English? He'll start laughing.
The weird thing is, when you come over in July and we meet up, you'll probably totally understand me.
Nah. Nah, probably not.
That's just an idea,
I don't understand you half the time.
You're from Ayrshire. I'm from Glasgow. You don't speak Scottish. You speak Ayrshire. I speak Scottish because I'm from Glasgow. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
So that was a brief history of Duntroon Castle. Next is one of our favourite locations. The next one, this is Sarah's. It's Sarah's one.
So this one is Duntroon Castle. We've been, like Scott said, absolutely beautiful.
Which castle is this now?
Duntroon.
Dunure. Dunure.
So Duntroon Castle was the ancient seat of the Kennedy family. The earliest known castle on the site was built prior to the 13th century, but the structure today was built a century later. Duntroon Castle was one of the major Kennedy strongholds in the Carrick. That's like air on that. Legend says that the Kennedys captured Duntroon from the Norwegians at the Battle of Largs in 1263. The first written historical records of the Kennedys at Duntroon is from 1357, when John de Kennedy's title to the estate at Duntroon was confirmed. There is little history of the castle during the 14th and 15th century, and during this time period the castle was transformed from a fortified tower to the castle which stands in ruin today. In 1429, a meeting took place at Duntroon between John MacDonald, who was representing the Lords of the Isles, and James Campbell, who was acting on behalf of King James I. The meeting was set to iron out any differences that the two parties had, but the meeting quickly turned south and MacDonald was killed. The MacDonalds were horrified and extremely angry about the killing of John MacDonald, so King James I had James Campbell executed to appease them, but the MacDonalds weren't satisfied, so they launched subsequent attacks on various royal outposts throughout Scotland. John MacDonald's descendant, David Kennedy, became the first Earl of Cassils in 1509, which was a reflection of the rising power of the Kennedy family. The Kennedy who is most associated with Dunua was the fourth Earl Gilbert, who was known as the King of the Carrick. Earl Gilbert was a very greedy man. He used forged documents to seize land from a nearby abbey. He then hired an assassin to kill the forger and then covered his tracks completely by having the assassin hanged on a false charge of theft. In 1563, Gilbert Kennedy entertained Mary Queen of Scots at Nerf Castle with feasting and celebrations lasting 4 days. I told you she'd been there.
Mm-hmm.
In 1570, Gilbert Kennedy grew very jealous over the land which was owned by the monks of Crossraguel Abbey. So he seized Alan Stewart, the commendator of the abbey, and pressured him into transferring the lands of the abbey over. But when Alan Stewart refused, Gilbert had him thrown into the Black Vault, and whilst he was in the Black Vault, Gilbert had Alan roasted on a spit twice. So he turned his body twice. After he couldn't take any more, he gave in and signed the lands to Gilbert. Things took a complicated turn after the spit roasting event, as Lord Kennedy of Bargany, who was Alan Stewart's brother-in-law, sent his men into the castle in secret to try and rescue Alan. The plan was discovered and the men were trapped inside the castle by Gilbert Kennedy. Gilbert then attacked his own castle to oust the barony men. The castle sustained heavy damage during the siege. The Earl had his men dig a mine under the keep, dismantled the battlements, and the stone was then dropped from above like primitive missiles. The Kennedy men were gaining the upper hand when the Lord Bargany appeared with a band of followers, forcing Gilbert to abandon the siege and release Alan Stewart. Alan Stewart, the guy who was spit roasted, survived to a ripe old age. I think he died 82, roughly. And the only subsequent injury that he had from the spit roasting was the fact that he never walked right. As for Gilbert Kennedy, he was never brought to justice for his actions. The castle outlived its usefulness as a military fortress by the middle of the 17th century and gradually fell into decay. Local tradition says that the castle was badly damaged by a fire after it became a ruin, but others believed that the stones were robbed by Cromwell's men in 1650. In 1704, the barony of Dunua passed to Sir Thomas Kennedy of Kirkhill, and the castle has passed through the line of the direct descendants since. Next to the castle ruin stands a 15th century conical stone ducat, like a sentinel watching over the castle. The ducat has space for 200 nesting boxes. It would have been essential as a source of food, eggs, and meat during lean winter months.
Thank you. So, I mean, this place, right, we have investigated there about 5, 6 times we've been there, and it never fails to deliver. We always seem to pick up a French woman for some reason. Every time we went, we picked up this French woman. We can't. We're trying to make the connection, but we can't make what the connection is to this particular woman. We always hear footsteps as well, right on just down the side of the road. It's like a gravel path, and every time we went, we've heard these footsteps coming down the gravel path. Every time we've checked it, there's been nobody about. This happens every single time. It's not huge as castles go. It's no big, but the amount of activity we've had in there every single time is just unbelievable. With Laura saying, never disappointed with also voices and noises from the prison area. The up the top of the castle is an old prison area. Gail and Laura went up one night and they get very spooked for some reason, so they won't go near there. Jonathan's got a message for you there, Rick. Hey, Rick, have fun at the Winchester party. Tell her hello for me. Riverside's going to Edinburgh soon. So it is a fascinating place, and there is quite a lot of history to it. I really don't know the history to it. Sarah was doing the research. But when you come over, Rick, if you've got time, we'd love to take you to this particular castle. It sits right on the coast. It's right on a cliff on the west coast of Ayrshire. It really is fascinating. What's your thoughts on it?
No, it's got quite a horrible history.
Aye, it's quite some castles have a romantic history. Others, this one's got quite a bloody history attached to it over the centuries. But it's one place that we would like to take you when you come over, if you've got the time. We plan going back within the next month or two. But that's Nerf Castle. Definitely a place to visit. And it's set in a beautiful part of the country. But the last place we're going to talk about tonight is, you can't talk about Haunted Scotland without talking about Edinburgh itself, the capital. I know you've got quite a passion for it as well, Rick, as we have. Edinburgh's, when we first started out, kind of thing. I've done loads and loads in Edinburgh, and I love the old town in Edinburgh because it's as if it's going to sound strange, but they've kind of picked up the old town and just steeped it in history and paranormal and stuck it back in, if that makes sense.
Well, there is so much paranormal in Edinburgh. I mean, you'll never find it all. I mean, it's everywhere you go. Like this picture that you can see that's behind me, Carlton Hill, that's haunted. If you go right down the stairs there's the Carlton Cemetery to the left, which is very haunted. And when you go farther into town, you got the real Mary King's Close, the Southbridge Vaults. What is the name of the place where they see the ghosts all the time, where Burke and Hare used to go all the time?
The Blair Street Vaults.
No, I'm thinking the place, the restaurant, the bar. I think it's called Brody's. But there's all kinds of places in Edinburgh that are haunted. I mean, one of the best pieces of K2 responses I ever got was at the Travel Lodge in Edinburgh. So I mean, the whole place is haunted.
I wouldn't expect to get. Well, it's usually Travel Lodge in Edinburgh. It's probably the land. There's got a picture for you.
There's Duntroon Castle there.
That looks a lot like the Hellfire Club when you first look at it.
It's a beautiful ruin. I mean, Edinburgh, as you said, it doesn't matter where you go in Edinburgh. There's steeped in history and there's paranormal. Starting up at the castle, there's several ghosts said to roam the castle. The drummer boy that's been heard. Nobody knows the origins of the story, seemingly, but it has been heard playing the drum. Have you ever heard of the Dung Ghost? Dung?
No.
No. The Dung Ghost is a ghost that's said to haunt the castle. Basically, what it is, dung is just another name for manure, horse manure. Basically, we call it dung over here. About 300-400 years ago, there was prisoners being held in the dungeons, and they had to go to the bathroom. They went to the bathroom in big wooden barrels, basically. And every now and again, the guards would come down, take the barrel away, empty it, bring it back. Not the nicest of jobs, but you know. And so one of the prisoners had the idea to hide in the barrel. Not the best hiding place, but and so he slid into the barrel thinking they're going to take the barrel outside the castle grounds and empty it, and I'll escape. But this time the guards didn't take it out of the castle. What they did was there was holes. We get this a lot in castles. There's holes in the side of the wall, and it was tipped out that way. And as you know, Edinburgh Castle was built on a volcanic rock. And so when they tipped the barrel, out came the prisoners as well, straight down basically. And so he said to haunt the dungeon area in Edinburgh Castle.
There it is.
Which is right
There's
behind
my
you.
house.
Sarah refers that to that as her house. Every time we go by it, she says,
"There's your castle."
Yeah. Well, the prisoner would have been poured out basically just round about that side wall there, and it's just a sheer drop, and so that was it. You know, game over.
Yeah.
There's also the Grey Lady. Who's been seen. One theory of the Grey Lady is that it's Nancy Douglas. Nancy Douglas was part of the Douglas family who were resented by King James V. King James V was basically out to get them. And when Nancy's husband died without a protector, she became the target of the king. He wanted her dead, basically. So he made up charges of treason and witchcraft against her. Her house servants were tortured into giving false confessions, and obviously because the king has brought the charges, nobody would argue with him. So, you know, needless to say, she was convicted and she was burned at the stake, just where the witch's well is, at the bottom of the esplanade. She was burned at the stake there as a witch. So it's her ghost that's said to haunt the castle. She's known as the Grey Lady. That's just one theory of who this lady is. Have you heard of the ghost of the drummer boy?
Yeah, I actually heard that.
Get down through the tunnel that was supposedly found.
You know what though? I have heard the drummer boy. I've heard of the bagpiper in St. Andrews. There's a lot of these people that go in to play the music and never come out again stories. So I don't know how much truth there is to the whole thing. I think there's maybe one of them that's really true, and then there's other people that just kind of took it for themselves, because can't be that many people walked into caves underground and never came out. You know,
Sure I'm sure there's a story like that associated with Culzean Castle.
But tunnel.
No, there's Culzean sits on right, like Duntroon, it sits right on the cliff, but there's underneath the castle there's cliffs that you can go in, and I'm pretty sure that a boy was sent into the cliff to see how far in it went, and I'm sure it was a dog he had with him, and occasionally you hear the dog and you hear bagpipes.
That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of stories about people going into these tunnels and never coming out.
I never see them. I mean, the thing that got me about the Edinburgh one, we were talking to a gentleman in Edinburgh about a year and a half ago, who works for a tour company in Edinburgh, and he was saying that story basically there's no truth behind it, because of the type of rock that the Royal Mile is on. It's impossible. It would have been impossible to dig a tunnel. The rock was just too hard, and there's never been any evidence of this tunnel found. Yet people have reported.
Well, that's That's what I've been trying to say. There's a lot of stories about people vanishing in tunnels, and half of them they can't find the tunnel. I think some of that is just folklore, but usually when there's a folklore story, it's built on something true. Now, something may have happened somewhere else, like the piper at St. Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
It could have. Then everybody had their own story. They hear something, say, well, maybe it's the underground, and that's just how that stuff spreads. I don't know. Just be honest with you. It's just
it's one of these things. If you can't find the tunnel, who's to say it's not been sealed off or whatever. Laura's saying, you're correct, sir. I grew up with that story with Killeen Castle. I take it. But see, that's the thing that I totally love Edinburgh. Totally love it, especially
I really love it myself. I mean, I really have missed not being there for the last 3 years. Because I was coming for a month every year and just love it, and then all of a sudden COVID hit. Now I've just been sitting here like a big bump on a log. So, man, I tell you, I can't wait to get back there. I mean,
2 weeks ago, we took a wee trip.
Not only that, one day I'm planning on doing the West Highland Way. Who wants to go with me?
I've done that. Oh, many moons ago, the West Highland Way. I've done that. It's a route from Glasgow to Fort William, I think it ends. I've done it about 20, 30 years ago or something. I did it.
So it's like the NC 500.
A bit like you walk it. Kind of drive it, but the thing
it's not 96 miles.
You need to.
And you want to walk 96 miles? You can't.
No, I says I did. I done it about 30 years ago.
Oh, I was going to
doing
say,
it now, I dare say I'd give it a go.
You can even walk 96 meters.
Shh, I can walk 96 meters. But one thing I find sad about Edinburgh is, see the Royal Mile. You know yourself, right? You can't walk 10 feet without there being something that's a history to it, some kind of paranormal story. There's a lot of places in the Royal Mile that have been forgotten about, that people walk by. Take out like the Gurth Cross, for instance, right down the bottom of the mile. The circle in the middle of the road. You think, how many people walk over that daily and they don't know the history there?
There is so much history in Edinburgh. I mean, it's like the Toll Booth Tavern.
Mm-hmm.
There's another famous place that's right there on the Royal Mile. Farther down at the end, more like toward Holyrood, if that's how you say it, the castle.
Yeah.
But there's so many places there that are reported to be haunted. And I can tell you one for sure, the Real Mary King's Close is, and the Southbridge Vaults are, because I've had things happen there that were pretty extraordinary. So
when you were in the close, did you encounter the wee girl at all?
I didn't understand that.
When you were in Mary King's Close, there is rumoured to be the spirit of a girl called Alice.
No, it's actually Annie, I think her name is.
Who'd that say?
Alice.
Annie. Annie's room.
Yeah, I've been to Annie's room, and I had a para-unity hunt there. And I had guys from the Scottish Paranormal. I had people from Premier Paranormal. That's my friend Brian Harley. And I had people from Anubis Paranormal, Mandy and Gary Fields and Janet Rust. They came over from England, and we had a para-unity hunt in there, which was really fun. But right outside Annie's room, there's a hallway. And we were standing there, and one of the ladies that worked, I think she was the assistant manager, Kat, her name was, we're all standing there, and I hear something, and I'm listening, and I don't want to tell anybody I heard anything. I'm watching their faces. And then I see them start looking up and looking around. So I know they're hearing something too. So finally I asked them, I said, you guys hearing something? They said, yeah. I said, what are you hearing? Because when you're ghost hunting, you never say, I hear this. Do you hear it too? Because all they always say is, yeah, that's what I heard. So I always let them tell me what they heard. Right.
Yeah.
And we all said the exact same thing. It sounded like a very loud heartbeat. So we asked Kat, who knows the place very well, because she was, one of the assistant managers. I believe that was her title. And she says, no, there's nothing here that would do that. And I said, could it be something from up above? She goes, no, we're way too far away for anything to get down here. So that was really interesting. But as we were walking up the thing, I don't know if for anybody out there that knows it, when you walk in, there's a real steep decline that you walk down. And as we were walking back up, we stood there and we heard noises along the side. And we looked over and the doorknob and one of the things was trying to open. So that was pretty cool too. Yeah, it's very haunted.
It's just the whole kind of atmosphere of the place. Even when you walk through when you come off the mile, before you even enter the wooden doors, it take you into the actual close itself. Even that little bit at night, you get a kind of atmosphere. I think just in that shot. I mean, it's only maybe 100 yards or something. It's not far.
Well, I have to tell you that there is nothing better, for looking spooky than Edinburgh when it's foggy. I remember I had been up on Carlton Hill and it was really foggy, and I walked down the hill and I decided to walk into the graveyard. Right now, I don't investigate graveyards. I will go into them and see if I see anything, but I don't go in there with equipment or anything else. I just figure if they got that far, I'm leaving them alone, So, but anyway, walking into that place in the fog, yeah, that'll get your attention.
That's one place we've not done yet. It's Carlton Hill. That's right. That's at the bottom of the mile. That right? Carlton Hill. No, Carlton Hill's over. Carlton Hill's over near the train station.
It's on the end of Princess Street.
Aye, I know where it is now. We were looking at that, but it's the stairs.
It's where we turn the car.
Mm-hmm. Aye, it's where we turn the car round.
Yeah, Carlton Hill's the one that looks like it has a thing from the Parthenon in Greece, and it's got all those other monuments that are up on the top.
Yeah, the other thing that fascinates me about Edinburgh is it's a Flodden Wall. We all know what the Flodden Wall was, still is. How a lot of it was taken down, when they realised that the English weren't going to invade, they decided, we'll take something down, and Edinburgh started to spread out. And then they invaded, But what I find fascinating is that parts of that wall are actually now somebody's, back garden, part of a garden wall.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got all these people leaning up against it. Could be at a bus stop, whatever, leaning up against, and they don't actually realise what they're leaning against, or whatever, what's right beside them, or what borders their garden from the street is actually part of the Flodden Wall. I know to some people it might seem uninteresting, but I just think it's fascinating.
Yeah, there's nothing about Scotland that isn't fascinating. I mean, I love going to Stirling, going to Stirling Castle. We're actually going to I believe we're going to ghost hunt no, we're not going to ghost hunt there, but we're going into the Stirling Jail. We're going into Stirling Castle. But St. Andrews is as haunted as a place as you're going to find.
Mm-hmm.
St. Andrews is very, very haunted. As a matter of fact, my friend Greg Stewart wrote a book on haunted Scotland, and he gives the tours for it. And I mean, I've been on his tour twice, and fascinating. I mean, everything there is haunted. If you buy a donut, it's haunted. Everything there is haunted.
I've been to St. Andrews a few times. I remember one time I went to St. Andrews and I went down onto the beach, and there was a crowd of people, maybe 20 people, over to the left of me, and they were doing some kind of ceremony. Maybe 200-300 yards away from me. It was a beautiful day. I was just sitting on a rock, just looking out at the sea. And this crowd of people were standing and putting their hands up in the air and singing and stuff like that. And I was it didn't freak me out. I was curious as to what they were actually doing. It wasn't hymns they were singing. It wasn't like Christian church hymns. It was it sounded more like Gaelic that they were singing on this particular spot in the beach, and they had tiny well, not tiny, small jars all dotted around them everywhere. And it was really, I don't know, it was really, really strange, you know, because you're sitting there trying to work out what they're saying and what they're doing, you know. But we're definitely coming to St Andrews to meet up with you, and Edinburgh as well. But I think we'll wind it up there. So you're over. What's next up for you, Rick? The Winchester House.
Winchester House this Saturday. It's actually on. It's going to be live streamed. Patty Negri, who's a very famous psychic medium, she's going to be doing a seance, and then we're going to go on and do a ghost hunt for a couple hours through Winchester Mystery House. It's on a thing called spiritrealm.net. And it's going to be a live stream, so you can watch it live.
That's Sarah's, one of Sarah's favourite locations, the Winchester House.
I've never been there, so I'm looking forward to it. People don't know about the Winchester House. It has 160 rooms, and it's 24,000 square feet. And nothing makes any sense in the entire place because she just told them, build and don't stop. So they built for 24 hours a day, this entire place. They have staircases that go into a wall. You open the door, there's nothing behind it. It's the whole place. That's why they call it the Mystery House. And it should really be interesting.
Is this your first time? Have you investigated with Patty before? Or?
I've never been there.
No, have you investigated with Patty before?
I didn't understand you. If I've been there before?
Have you investigated with Patty before?
No, I have not. This will be a first. I know Patty. You know, we've been places together, but no, we haven't investigated together yet. So that should be a lot of fun. I actually have some very good ghost hunters coming to also do their. One of my friends is the voice of Fate Magazine Radio. And the other girl that's coming is she does a lot of stuff at Mansfield Prison and Old South Pittsburgh Hospital and Old Paulding Jail. So got some pretty good ghost hunters coming along with me. My friend Cheryl Plum and then Mikey Thompson. They're really good ghost hunters who go to the LAPD museum with me a lot. So yeah, so I'm really looking forward to it.
If there's a link for it, right, if you can send me it, then I will be happy to put it up on the page. We'll definitely be watching.
Yeah, it's real easy to remember. It's just spiritrealm.net.
It's me you're talking. I'll need to write that down.
I was telling Sarah, actually.
I heard the link yesterday, remember?
That's what I love about you, Rick. The confidence that you have in me is just overwhelming.
Yeah, but you know, one thing you'll find out, Scott, if I don't tease you, that means I don't like you.
All right, so
that's if I'm playing with you, that means I like you. So you Laura put it up too, spiritrealm.net. I think if you put the words together too, because they're like all together.
Okay.
When you put it up
for me. So you teasing me as a sign of fright? Well, that's fine then.
Hey, you're my buddy, Scott. You're my buddy. How many times have we talked on the phone? Or
I don't know. One time we shots on, but we won't go there. You know, let's just say this, my friend. In July, I hope it's raining, so you don't need to wear shorts for me up. You know what I mean? He doesn't understand.
Well, you got to bring Sarah and Laura with you so they can translate.
I love the verbal abuse that I get from this guy. It's amazing. You know, even when we do phone calls, I get the abuse as well. It's totally amazing. But we will be watching on Saturday. Patty's been on a few times. So I need to mail Patty actually. She was supposed to be on last week, but she got caught up with filming, so I need to mail her. But everybody watch that, spiritrealm.net, Saturday night. Rick and the lovely Patty Negri will be at the Winchester House. Fascinating location.
I am not jealous.
I know. That's Sarah wants to go. One day. She'll get there one day. You know?
Yeah, it should be interesting, you know, without a doubt.
Oh, with you and Patty together, it'll be nothing less than interesting. I mean, I think it'll be a good one. So we'll call it a night there. We'll just hold on just for a wee second or two, Rick, if that's all right.
Sure.
After we come off. We are back on Thursday night with Matt Barron, the paranormal consultant. And then we'll get a special live on Saturday night at midnight because Sarah and I are going camping this weekend. And it'll be our first ever live that we've done from a tent. So it should be interesting. That's with Hectic Paranormal from Australia. But thanks very much. A big, huge thank you to Mr. McCullum for coming in. Always a pleasure. And thanks to Laura for all her research and her writing. And thanks to everybody who watched. And remember, watch this guy.
That guy.
The guy with the hat. The guy with the hair.
I have hair.
The guy with the hair. Watch that. And we'll see you Thursday, folks. So take care and stay safe. And thanks for coming in. See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.